We're making a list.
We're checking it twice.
Gonna find out who's traded there, guys.
Podcast pals are coming to town.
Thank you very much. It's
Yeah.
another crossover episode of the eMLB podcast. I'm Aiden, joined by my fellow Here's Why You're Wrong co-host and Brenden, and two of the three insiders in Andrew and JR. Gentlemen, it's a great day. Expansion draft coming up. We'll talk about that a little later. A lot of trades for the offseason self-imposed trade deadline and some free agents we're going to talk about. It's an action-packed time in eMLB. Probably the most fun we've had in an offseason in recent memory.
It really feels like the chaos of the regular season has just extended past it. I'm here for it.
Heck, I might have more fun in this offseason than I do during a regular season.
Yeah, because your
This is
team actually
exciting.
has some hope.
Wow.
That was the South Bird. I don't know what you're saying wow for.
Oh, wow.
I mean, you just signed Nick Spence to a monster extension. I don't know what you're worried about.
Well worth it.
Except for maybe money. But
I'm not worried about nothing right now. I'm a big budget team now.
He's a big boy.
Baltimore, big man.
yeah, we realize that he's actually got a higher payroll than I do now.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about some of these trades that happened. We had a bunch of them. Let's start with LeRon Smith being traded from Minnesota to the Dodgers. The first, I think we can say, big domino to fall of this pre-expansion draft trade deadline bonanza, whatever you want to call it. This was the first move of Jason Cleghorn, who came in to take over Minnesota, and he made his thoughts known right away, and he decided to make this deal. LeRon Smith, a top catcher in the American League last year, I would say, probably top 5 in the American League, probably top 10 in the eMLB. But Andrew, do you think he got enough back for Smith?
Can you go back to the details again? I need to remind myself. I mean, it's hard to say that you didn't get enough back when you got 5 players, and I think a lot of those players are decent players, have the potential to be decent players. Was it Ramon there? Ramon Jackson is the star of the return back, looking like a potential ace for Minnesota in the future, depending on how he develops. I don't think it was a bad move. Maybe he could have. There's questions on maybe Minnesota could have gotten more for LeRon. Maybe if he had held out. Maybe like holding out to like the trade deadline of next season, maybe to see where his team goes and see if a team might be desperate enough to offer more for LeRon Smith to boost their lineup. But honestly, I can't say he got a bad deal out of it because he got a lot of decent players. My thing is for LeRon Smith as a team that was trying to improve their catching, I actually didn't really want to add LeRon because I saw him more as a first baseman than a catcher, because while he can play the catcher position at an average rate, I prefer catchers that have at least above average defense, if not elite defense. And I wonder if the Dodgers are going to use him as catcher or if they're going to put him in like a DH or a first base role.
Now, JR, I want to ask you this question here as we take a look at LeBron's stats there. Timo Hernandez is maybe a little bit better defensively, but equivalent, who is the catcher they got back in this deal from LA. But do you see this team in Minnesota making a play for a better defensive catcher? Because I don't know if Timo Hernandez is the answer defensively. And we've seen on a lot of these teams, these CCP-created catchers, how important defense is.
Yeah, I think that, the problem with a guy like Timo Hernandez, in my opinion, he doesn't really excel either side, whether as a catcher behind the plate or at the plate. I mean, he's a solid hitter there, but I don't necessarily know that they need to go out and get a better defensive catcher there. I just think they kind of traded LeRon for a player, at least here from the catching position, that's replacing him. That's definitely a couple steps down as a hitter, and isn't really giving you a defensive boost on the other side of that. So The rest of the haul is kind of okay. I mean, you definitely have to count on Ramon Jackson really panning out for this deal to make a lot of sense, in my opinion. And that's why, I felt like there was probably, potentially some better deals out there. I think a deal like this you could get at any time for a talent like LaRon Smith. I mean, you can get a deal like this whenever you'd want to pull the trigger on it. I would want to get more before I trade a franchise player like this.
You just feel like maybe he rushed the decision-making process a little too fast.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, again, I'm surprised a lot of times at how the franchise players are traded in our league, to be honest with you. I think it's surprising how many of them actually get moved, especially from a team that, if you are going to go into a rebuilding phase, you want to build around somebody. And if you're not going to build around a guy like a LaRon Smith, it's going to be hard to find some other guys to build around.
I do kind of get the impulse a little bit to blow it up completely and start from scratch, especially if you're a new GM taking over a new team. Like, I understand wanting to bring your own guys in and have that be the team build around. You gotta think though that LaRon Smith had so many years of control left. I'm with you, JR. I would have thought that'd be better to at least build around him, plan to build around him, and then, like you said, Andrew, like trade him mid-season if you're not doing very well and you think you can get a bigger return.
We obviously
go ahead.
I was just gonna say we obviously don't know how negotiations went or anything like that. I mean, we know how it personally went if we made an offer or anything like that. But do you think that, just based on maybe some urgency to move him, just like you were saying, to maybe blow it up so that way you could make your own team? Do you think that maybe in this league, and this could be a generalized question, when a new GM comes in, they're a little too impulsive and don't really take a step back, especially when you come in just before the off season and you haven't really had a chance to see your team play?
Yeah. We saw it with Minerva when he took over, making several high impact moves right away, and most of them not panning out. I don't think that this is the same situation, because obviously this is still not a bad return for the player. It's not a free agent that you're giving lots of money to, but I think that in general, period, if you're a new GM in this league, there's an urge to want to make a lot of big moves.
Yeah, but that's not been the case for a lot of the new GMs that have come in, like Kenny in Atlanta, Tim in Arizona, and I can't remember the new GM for the A's. They haven't really done those really big impact moves that we're talking about. They've kind of bided their time. They're making some small moves here and there. So it's not every new GM that comes in and wants to blow it up and make it their own. I think it just depends on who the person is and what they want to do with the team.
That's true, but on the flip side, I agree with you that it depends on who it is. Heber took over the Phillies and within a couple days had made massive free agent splashes and spent tons of money. Aiden took over the Braves and had made multiple trades. I took over the Orioles and halfway through my first season made a monster deal to go get Verdugo. I think it just kind of depends on the personality of the GM.
Correct.
And I think this is Jason loudly announcing to the league that he is going to be a very loud GM, and I like that.
So let's talk about
maybe be afraid to make the big move.
Let's talk about maybe a little bit of a quieter GM, but in another deal with a new GM going to the Dodgers. Let's talk about Byron Buxton being traded from Detroit over to the Dodgers, if I'm not mistaken, in this deal.
I got thrown up because I'm like in my head Buxton's on the Twins. I'm like, oh wait, no, he wasn't on the Twins here.
Byron Buxton and hold on, can you go back for a second just so I can read the whole thing real quick?
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't have it written down. So we've got Byron Buxton and Felix Matthews in exchange for 5 players in Jorge Cardenas, Scott Barlow, Mike Bears, Josue Espada, and Alex Steele. Interesting deal. I think out of the 2 deals, this one makes more sense with getting Buxton sort of out of it, and I think it's a pretty decent return for Detroit in this deal. Brenden, you want to kick us off?
Well, first of all, I think that Alex Steele probably should not consider his future in baseball very long. I think he needs to get into a different industry, and I personally think with that name, the industry would be perfect.
I'm gonna have to Chara buddy that, man.
Moving on. I don't
Take
I
your
hate
time,
can't put
Stan.
that up on YouTube.
Take
I
your
don't
time,
hate the
Stan.
return. I really like Mike Byers, at least as an offensively minded catcher who will have decent enough defense. Scott Barlow looks like he can have the potential to be a really good reliever. But obviously, relief prospects are capped in value because they're relief prospects, right? Jorge Cardenas also looks like Jorge Cardenas looks like he can be a decent starting pitcher prospect. I don't think that if you're just looking at this as a Buxton trade, I like it. The addition of Felix Matthews makes this a bad trade in my mind. I don't understand why you would trade Felix Matthews, a guy who you have lots of team control over, and who looks to be a very productive hitter at the plate.
The Canadian, who's a sort of advised his role as a more utility role. You know, JR, I'll let you go here, but also I want you to tell me, where does he fit in, though, in this Dodgers team?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I was kind of in the same line as Brenden, that I was a little surprised to see Matthews traded, partly because, Steven had made it clear that he wanted to move Dexter Morgan, and he was looking to move Levon Soto. I was surprised to see him move Felix and Dexter Morgan there from that middle infield. I didn't necessarily blame him for moving, one or the other, because there were a lot of infield prospects there, or not prospects necessarily, but young infielders there with a lot of team control, and there was an opportunity to sacrifice one of those to get some talent in return, especially since he was extending Michael Brooks there at shortstop. But yeah, in terms of Matthews coming over to the Dodgers, I mean, the good thing is he can play a lot of different positions, so he could be kind of that primary backup to Juan Corcoran and to DMAC potentially, to first base, to Al Hinton. So I think he's a guy who he may not be necessarily a regular starter in a specific spot, but he can get a lot of at bats, ranging around.
So I looked at the Dodgers depth chart. He's actually updated it. It looks like he's moving Corcoran over to third, and Matthews is slotting in as the starting second
okay.
baseman. Because they don't really, looking at their roster, they don't really have a bona fide third baseman, and maybe you can put Corey Seager there. Darius McKenzie could obviously learn how to play third, but it looks like he's sliding Corcoran to third and putting Matthews at second.
Okay.
And honestly,
I mean,
this is one of the deepest infields in baseball.
Oh,
now
yeah.
with
Good lord.
also,
yeah.
Also, you got to
look
think
at that.
too. I mean, according to reports, we cannot confirm or deny this. We'll find out soon. We have been told that both Cody Bellinger and Corey Seager, according to reports and sources, will be left unprotected in this upcoming expansion draft, which we'll talk about a little later. But
I'll hold my thoughts on that.
we'll hold our thoughts on that. Let's talk about another deal that Minnesota made. I want to talk about Max Kepler heading to San Francisco in what I would consider a better return than he got for Laron Smith, in a very good deal that saw Alex Kirilloff. I put Kepler, not Kirilloff. My bad.
That might have been my bad when we were preparing. My bad.
Yeah, that might have been you, honestly.
Wrong K outfielder.
Yes, Kirilloff for $5 million. Scott Morgan, Dave Rudolph, Luis Morales, and Fred Wilson. Gentlemen, Morales being the number 7 prospect, I believe that might have been in the Giants organization, or was that number 7 overall? I can't remember. But a pretty
like he's
good
number
deal.
7 overall.
Yeah, number 7 overall. So a decent return for Kirilloff. What's your thoughts here? And San Francisco really trying to keep pace in the NL West.
I think of all the teams that could afford to give a number 7 overall prospect like Morales as a pitcher, it would be San Francisco, because they are loaded at the pitching position, not only in the majors but in their minors as well. And I think that if you're San Francisco, with your biggest weakness being offense last year, you can afford to overpay a little bit for a bat like Kirilloff, and I think that's what they did here. I think it's a great return for Minnesota. I do think it's a little bit of an overpay for someone like Kirilloff, but if you're San Francisco, you're willing to take that risk with the prospects sending over because you're looking to improve your offense in a big way. And really on free agency, outfielders, really the only big bet out there is a coming off of injury Verdugo. Not a lot of outfielders to go this season, so I think it's a good move for both sides, even if it's a little bit of an overpay for San Francisco.
You know what? I think in this league, there's a massive tendency for people to, we were talking about this earlier, massive tendency for people to overvalue what they have and be afraid to make upgrades because they think that they're going to overpay. I love this move. I love this move because this is someone who realizes that not everyone you have is going to pan out. Not everyone you have is going to get to play in the future. Use those prospects to get better now. Kirilloff is an awesome player. Like, you know, we can see his WAR totals. WAR is an imperfect stat, but WAR is a nice snapshot of value. We can see those totals for the last 3 seasons. He is a consistent player. He's a 5-time All-Star. He has a great hitting profile, especially with that gap power. He's going to be awesome in San Francisco. I love this move.
Yeah.
Thank you for censoring yourself.
And again, you know, to your point, to kind of build off of Brendan's point, you know, again, this is a player in Morales who's still a ways off, you know, from being a major league player. And, you know, there's the OSA scouting rankings have him really high. You know, my scout just candidly rates him a lot lower than the OSA rating. So there could be some wildly different views, you know, on where his talent is. But a guy like Kirilloff, again, is proven. I mean, he's a proven hitter. He's 29 years old, so he should still have, you know, several more years of a good play ahead of him. And he's exactly what San Francisco needs. And when you have the hitting need as much as they did, even if you look at this as a little bit of an overpay, I think you're well within reason to do that.
I'm going to say the best. I'm going to say the best player that Minnesota got back in this is the $5 million in cash.
Cash considerations, baby.
Cash consideration strikes again.
He's going to be a CCP at some point. I know it.
Who's going to do it?
I don't know.
We're going to have cash considerations, player to be named later, designated for assignment.
I think each one of us should make one.
Yes. Who's the fourth? We need a fourth.
Player to be named later, designated for assignment, cash considerations, and
waiver wire.
Let's let the community decide.
Yeah.
Down in the comments down below, guys. Put your suggestions. We'll review them next episode.
There you go.
Get some engagement on the video.
Yes, there we go. All right, let's talk about another deal. Let's go ahead and jump down to a deal one of us made. Let's talk about Joe Adell finally leaving St. Louis. It feels like he's been on the block since 2020 in real life.
Put him on the block this year.
He's been shopped around quite a bit.
I was gonna say this man's been shopped around more than a Publix buy one get one free for all you Southerners out there.
Of course, that means it's fitting that JT Realmuto's in the trade because he's been, you know, a guy on the move quite a bit in his own right.
Yeah, so Joe Adell, the full trade. Joe Adell heads to Seattle for Izuarte Dures, Joe Perez, and JT Realmuto with part of the salary retained, if I'm not mistaken.
So, no, actually, the retention is on Philadelphia when Philadelphia moved him to Seattle.
Copy.
So, Seattle did not retain anything on this deal.
Andrew.
Yes.
Thought process, why did you make this deal? How do you feel like you made out in this deal?
So, when I signed Adell to the extension that I did, he was coming off of his monster breakout season the first year after I got traded for him from Los Angeles, where he hit over 40 home runs, had a WAR over 4, and so I thought he was going to be a mainstay in the middle of my lineup. But the past 2 seasons, he's kind of fallen down to earth, kind of around league average offensive-wise, while always still providing fantastic defense for me. But I felt like the contract that he had, it's only going to get bigger, and he wasn't going to play up to that contract anymore. And I've also got a center field prospect in the name of Mickey Chapman at AAA, who put up an outstanding season for me after I traded for him from San Diego, who the only knock on him defensively is his arm strength, which I can deal with, and he might even profile as a potentially slightly above average hitter, which would be an improvement on Adele. And in return, the Mariners were trying to move off of Realmuto's contract, trying to free up some financial space. And honestly, anyone I can get back as a catcher will be better than what Melendez did for me offensively last year. So even on a down year with Realmuto, he was better offensively than Melendez was. And actually, one of the main reasons I was able to stay around in the playoff race was because I took out Melendez and put in Ivan Herrera as a catcher, and he absolutely exploded offensively, and that was a big help to the end of my season last year. Melendez is still fantastic defensively, but I mean, at this rate, I'm looking for offensive improvements over defense at the catcher position. And Realmuto is still a good defensive catcher in his own right, just not close to elite, if not elite.
So, Brenden and JR, I want to do a little exercise real quick. Let's give this deal a grade. A, B, C, D, F. All right? The three of us will do that.
For both sides or overall?
We'll give a grade for each side. All right? So, Brenden, you want to kick us off?
I'll be honest with you. It's an A+ for St. Louis and a B- for Seattle. Reason it's an A+ for St. Louis is St. Louis dumps this monstrosity of a contract. It's not gigantic, but for who Adele is, I feel like that's not a good value, especially with the age that the contract's going to. And in return, you get an upgraded catcher who you don't have to pay for a long time. And you get 2 very good prospects. Now, on Seattle's part, it's a B-. Probably more like a B because you're giving up the prospects and you're taking on longer contract. But it's still a good deal because obviously you've been looking to remove Realmuto, and you make a big outfield addition in Adele, who's going to immediately start and be an improvement over what you already had. Not a bad trade for either side, but I definitely give the edge to St. Louis on this one.
Yeah, JR? Yeah, I don't know that I would really want to be locked into that Adele contract as long as it's going to be. I mean, he has the opt-out provision in there, but, I just don't know that he's going to have the production where he's going to want to opt out of those last couple seasons. And, it would be one thing, I think, if Realmuto's contract had another year or 2 on it that you wanted to try to get out from under, but I mean, you're just down to the last year in 2027. So, that to me wouldn't be much of a motivation, to get out from under that. I think it's a really good deal for Andrew. He's not really tied to Realmuto. I mean, he's going to be entering this season at his age 36 year, in his final year of his contract. So, if he performs well and he wanted to extend him for another season, that it's probably not going to be, all that expensive given his age, or he can just walk away and he still ends up with, 2 pretty good prospects for getting rid of Adele's contract. I think, it's a win-win all around for Andrew.
I agree. I'm going to go A for you, Andrew. I really like the deal, and I'm going to give a C for similar reasons to Seattle. Not that it's a bad deal for them, but I think relatively average. Let's move on to another deal that was made by one of us, and this one was actually made by me, sending Austin Meadows to the Chicago White Sox, as well as Estuco Rune, the knuckleball princess, who, for full transparency, I don't know if this has been announced. Do you think I should say it here?
It was announced on stream.
Okay. Sorry, I missed the last part of stream. So, Rune will be getting 20 boosts. The creator of Rune has passed away. Our condolences. We know it's a while back, but still our condolences to her family. In return, Denny Martinez, the second place finisher in the AL Cy, or the third place finisher, or second or third place finisher in the AL Cy Young, will head to Tampa, as well as Dave Carrasco, Sid Cook, Juan Blanco, and Alfredo Figueroa. Anyone have any questions? I'll start with that.
Oh, and you're also retaining some on Meadows
Yeah,
as well,
retaining
right?
25% on Meadows.
I just kind of I don't get what the massive urgency was to add pitching right now, giving up a bat like Meadows. Like Meadows is one of the best hitters, one of the more consistent hitters in the American League. Like he's not never going to be upper echelon, but he's extremely productive and extremely consistent. I don't. I like Meadows, but I feel like with the prospects that were coming back, this deal is not. It's not unfair. It's not unbalanced either way. It's just really meh.
I don't understand it from the White Sox perspective really that much, to be honest. I mean, maybe you're not a believer in Denny Martinez, I guess, but at the same time, I mean, he's been pretty consistent as a starter there, and the White Sox. It's not like they've had an outstanding run of starting pitching, and I just when you're in a market like theirs, I think they could find a bat that they're looking for, whether it's via trade with somebody else without having to give that pitching up or on the free agent market. I really don't understand the urgency to give up all of that they gave up for Meadows. I mean, again, I know Rune's in there as a part of the deal, and is going to be boosted to hopefully be a better pitcher there, but that's still a lot to give up there essentially because you want to add that bat.
I kind of I do get it because Martinez is not the most overwhelming pitcher, and I think that maybe you feel like his success is, to borrow a phrase, a fluke.
Yeah, you,
Don't
you,
let
you
me
have to
rephrase
believe
that.
that. You have to believe that to make this deal.
Yes, I think that's probably where he's coming from here, and from that perspective, I do understand it because Meadows is a known you know what you're getting with him. And pitching is more available this free agency period, so maybe you figure you trade Meadows and some, okay prospects, or you trade Martinez and some okay prospects for Meadows, and you get your hitter, and then you go sign a pitcher.
Yeah, because there's some pitchers out there that they could sign. I want to go back to a point, Brendan, that you made, that you don't know why Tampa Bay is going out and looking for pitching, because even with the injury to Doc Luger, you still have pretty decent depth in pitching in Tampa Bay that some teams would kill for. Like you've got a lot of potential in that starting rotation. So I also agree. I don't know if it was necessary to go out and get a pitching at the cost of sacrificing your consistent offense. Uh,
That's probably
so
more what I mean. Like you probably could have gotten that kind of value. Like Martinez is obviously has had two exceptional seasons in a row, and maybe and you have to think that Tampa expects him to continue doing that.
and if he does, then that's a great trade for Tampa.
Yeah, it
But
just feels more risky than I would have personally felt comfortable doing, but I didn't make the trade.
I agree with that logic. Yeah. I think for me, I'm looking at this as like I have so much uncertainty about it that I'm like, I think it's like a wait and see how all of these players perform and develop before we can really say like I can't really say if like one trade side was better than the other. It's just like, oh, this is kind of weird. I guess we'll wait and see what happens with everyone.
If both of them have all-star caliber seasons, I'll just call it a win-win and move on.
Yeah, fair enough.
I mean, I'll talk you guys sort of through my logic of this. I feel like, at least with Meadows, I was cashing in on the value I felt like I could cash him in on because, in my personal opinion, if I was competitive at the deadline, I wouldn't move Meadows, and he has a player option next year that he probably won't take because he can get more money on the open market just with the lack of free agents that will probably be available. And then adding Martinez, you can never have too much pitching, and that also allows me, if I want to, I can start Espinoza in the minor leagues, get him a little more seasoning because he didn't do great in his few outings up at the major league level. I can get him a little more seasoning if I choose to. Also, Sid Cook is sort of the guy in this deal that a lot of people, I think, ratings wise doesn't look at, but he has a great profile, a great set of pitches, excellent control, decent movement, decent stuff, and has put up some really good stats in the minor leagues. especially as a normal power pitcher, but he is a right-handed pitcher. I really like what he brings to the table, personally, after a great season in
Stamina's a
Double A
little
last
low.
year.
This is an interesting pitch mix.
Stamina's a little low, may translate more as a high leverage reliever. But
I actually
we'll
think
see.
if he was a high leverage reliever, his stuff would go up quite a bit. You might get a lot more strikeout result out of him.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of options with him. And obviously, some of those other prospects will be good. Dave Carrasco will challenge for a spot in the bullpen this year. Just trying to add more guys to have great movement, great control, decent stuff, but something I look for as a ground ball pitcher with this defense that I have behind him. But also something that's sort of unsaid is that with Meadows now moving on, it opens up a spot for Ashless Dudley to play in left field and get everyday at bats at the
Yeah.
big league level. Who last year with Atlanta, when I had him in Atlanta, he got on base at a tremendous clip in the leadoff spot in Atlanta and would have had a better opportunity if we had the roster spot for him. He avoids Ks at a great rate. And Brenden, can you pull up just his stats from the major leagues last year by chance?
You're gonna see my super cluttered stat screen, but yeah.
That's fine. I mean, we look at it like that. A 310 average in, 23 games, but over 100 plate appearances. Had an OPS of 748. Didn't strike out too much. Walked at a decent clip. Had some doubles. Got a good amount of singles. Not a high strikeout percentage. A decent OPS plus and a weighted runs created plus. 3 stolen bases as well. I mean, he plays an exceptional defense as well. And he plays all over the place. So this will give him a chance to play at the big league level on a regular basis now, which was important for me to do as well.
Talking about how Brenden said earlier, some teams keep certain players close to the chest. This is yours.
This is my guy. And
yeah, there's a strong personal element there, so.
Oh yeah, for sure.
If you guys don't know and you're newer to the league, Ashless Dudley was drafted by the Tampa Bay Rays first overall in the 2024 or 2025. I can't remember which draft I was in.
I think it was 4.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it was 2024. You can look at Pearson too. Either one of them works.
23.
Wow, it was the 2023.
That was even
Jeez.
earlier.
Yeah. So the 2023, he was drafted in the first round. Aiden Pearson, my CCP, was drafted in the second round by Tampa. Then both of them were traded together to Atlanta, and then both of them traded together back to Tampa Bay. Traded for Doc Luger, who now Pearson, Doc Luger,
And
Alex Murray, and Ashless Dudley. It's funny how it all comes full circle. But are now all a member of this Tampa Bay Rays team. So Dudley and I had sort of created this storyline of going everywhere together, being roommates and everything. So he's definitely someone I keep close to the chest. 2 more deals, probably the 2 big deals that happened. Let's talk about the first one. Barbosa, the starting pitcher, headed to Cleveland. AL East arms race getting even bigger.
I'm trying to find the other
Barbosa.
half of the deal. Okay, so here's the $1 part.
Humberto Flores.
Because the deal was so big, it had to be separated into 2 trades.
Now, I want to point out the notes column on the right side for all of the players that Kansas City's getting back. Look at all these top the top 124, 103, all of these top prospects coming over from Cleveland. And I just want to say, if we're talking about like grading each side, I think I'd give both teams an A for this because Cleveland, coming off of their impressive run at the AL Central, the last AL Central division title we'll ever have, added. They already have the Cy Young Award winner in Martin Bradford. They add another ace, and this 1-2 punch is going to be one that rivals Jandy Ronson and Ethan Candela in San Francisco. I'm not going to say they're there yet, but I say this is the second one. Well, I don't know. Between this and the Orioles, which is the better 1-2 starting two pitchers.
This one purely because Knight's regression this last year. Knight had a down year. Maybe he might bounce back, and Reed in the entire season. We don't know.
And you don't know how Reed's going to come back from injury too.
I defer to Cleveland.
That's fair. But yeah, definitely top. I go ahead and say top 3 1-2 punch in the starting rotation. And on Kansas City side, as a team looking to rebuild after going unfortunately from first to last in the AL Central in 2 consecutive seasons, they got back a lot of talent.
I really do feel I feel like Minerva is very fairly criticized for a lot of moves he's made at the head in Kansas City, but it's a constant learning experience, and I think with the context and the full knowledge of what he's previously done, as well as Aaron being a bit of a steadying hand in Kansas City, I think he has put this team on the right track towards a total rebuild.
Correct.
And I think a successful one, because this prospect package is not guys who are 4 years away. This prospect package is guys who are going to be ready within the next year to year and a half.
Dominic Dark probably being Silva might be the biggest name there.
Yes. Silva's got a great story behind him. We'll save that for another day.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to trade an ace like Barboza, this is the package you have to get in return for him, especially from somebody that is was one of your main division rivals in the AL Central. I can't remember if are they in the same division in their realignment?
Nope.
Okay.
No, they're not.
Okay, so again, but if you're going to trade a guy like Barboza, which I kind of hate to see Kansas City having traded Barboza after they traded Rosario, and just I felt like they had so many young pitchers there at one point that were going to develop together. So part of me kind of hates to see that happen. But if you're going to trade him, I mean, this is the package you get. You cash in big time, and kudos to Minerva for doing that. And like you guys said, kudos to Sadier for using the depth of talent that he had to make this move.
I talked about it earlier with San Francisco, having the balls to go out and do it. I love it.
Yeah, absolutely. And he can do that too, because even the guys at the big league level that are starting for him are younger guys too. It's not like he has a bunch of aging hitters that he's going to have to replace here very soon.
Let's go ahead and take a look at this real quick.
Yeah, I mean, you got a point for sure. There's definitely some stuff happening here. Brenden, you have a filter on, so it won't show everyone.
That's true. I just have my
the
expansion draft coming up. Got to be prepared. So you got Tecker, you got Setner, you have Bradford, you have Barboza. Beaver's still there. We'll just ignore him.
And he's the one making the most money.
But then in the minors, you also have Prouse, who's an interesting prospect. You have this guy, Moran. And you have this guy named Bob Royal, who's Sadier's CCP. This team is loaded with young pitching.
This team might end up with a better pitching staff in San Francisco at the end.
I'm scared. I am really, really scared in the AL East.
Yeah, me too.
Cleveland got a lot better this year. They got a lot better.
Let's move on to the last deal we're going to talk about, because we spent way more time than we even planned on talking about trades, which we always do.
Yeah, I feel like here's why you're wrong episodes go by fairly quickly. It's when we drag you two into it that we start getting all stuck.
You two are the problem. You two are the problem. And we're also
Is that supposed to be an insult? I just love talking baseball.
Just so y'all are aware. So, last deal. Rafael Devers, out of Boston, Triple Crown winner. He heads to Seattle. Wow, is that a deal?
Oh, there it is.
I was about to say, where is it?
No, that's with San Diego. There we go. I think
the deal did happen, right?
Yes, it did.
Jose Tena and Rafael Devers for Pepe Clark, Alberto Mondesi, and Luis Serna. Gentlemen, Boston got fleeced.
I think that Boston at this point in time is so desperate to have anything resembling competent pitching that they made a very
Costly.
foolish and costly move. Devers was not the best hitter on the team. Yes, he won the Triple Crown. Not the best hitter on the team, but he was the second best hitter on the team, and he was one of the best hitters in the American League, and he's consistently been one of the best hitters in the American League. I don't understand how you swap him for an admittedly very strong pitching prospect, and a hitter who, while super talented, has mostly failed to live up to that talent.
Yeah, the key word you mentioned there was the starting pitcher in there as a prospect. You know, if you're going to trade Rafi Devers at this point for a deal like this, to me, you trade him because you're going to get somebody back who can immediately help your rotation, or very soon. At the very least, if you're going to trade him for a starting pitching prospect, it's got to be somebody who, you know, is at more of that AAA, you know, AA level that's going to be, you know, at least in the big leagues at some point this season to potentially give you a boost, I think.
Is it wrong to think that they probably could have gotten more for Devers?
Oh, they definitely could have gotten more.
I feel like this is Boston. Boston doesn't trade very much, and so I don't know if they gave. I don't know if they gave it enough time, because they just don't do it enough. They didn't shop them enough. They just kind of took the first best deal that they got. And I also feel like this is Boston waving the white flag a little bit in the East.
If we're talking about the AL East, there's a
as the mascot refuses to be moved.
If we're talking about the AL East, there's, in my opinion, a definite top three in Cleveland, Baltimore, and Tampa. Then you've got this secondary group of mishmash, sort of who knows what's going to happen.
I like the confidence returning. Oh yeah, my team's definitely in the top division.
I mean, you've got to think those three teams are at the top of the division, because with this trade, Boston takes a step back. Boston's in that second tier, probably sitting there along with. The other teams in this are what we add from the Central, Detroit. We add from the Central, Cleveland, and we add from the Central. Who am I missing? Chicago. So I got to think Chicago and Boston probably in that middle tier, and then Toronto, New York, and Detroit. Or Detroit sort of fluctuates between the two, in my opinion. So it's like, what is Boston doing here, where the AL East has gotten better at the top, and they've regressed?
They're counting too much on Pepe Clark actually playing up to his scouted ratings. If he does perform the way everyone is expecting him to, then this looks a little bit better. But you can't say, like, just looking at how he's performed over the past couple seasons, you have to say that Seattle got away with murder on this one, honestly.
Yeah.
Plus getting the young but very interesting prospect here, Tenya.
Yeah, for sure. All right, gentlemen, let's move on to the most exciting part of the eMLB offseason here in the 2026-2027 offseason, the eMLB expansion draft. We will have the Portland Stags and the Montreal Expos drafting here shortly. I believe it's slated for Sunday morning at 10 a.m., so be there to involve all the excitement. Huh?
You said so be there, and I said or be square.
That is true. So I don't know exactly how we want to do this discussion, because it's just sort of an open topic. Protection lists are out. We've seen some Twitter announcements of players that are going to be left unprotected. We've heard some rumors, like I mentioned, with Bellinger and Seager. Also, I've heard through the grapevine Blake Snell could be left unprotected. Nathan Eovaldi is being left unprotected, not shocked to many. There are a lot of guys being left unprotected who have big contracts. I was using Eovaldi as a contract basis there. But at least from your guys' own personal perspectives with your team, and I'll start with this one. Was it difficult or easy to make your 25-man protection list, and why? I'll start with this one. For me, it was a little more difficult. The top 20 to 22, for sure, no brainers, easy. It was the last like 3 or 4 slots that it was like, okay, I've got 6 or 7 guys who I'd like to keep, but I obviously can't keep all of them. How do you decide which one to keep? And eventually it just comes down to what you feel like your team needs and who's going to be better for you, who's a younger prospect, who shapes up in the right way. But I'd love to hear what your guys' strategy was in creating your protection list.
Andrew should go first here because he's going to be more in line with you, I think.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was kind of the same thing. I'm getting down to the last 2 or 3 on my list because the first 22 were pretty straightforward. And I actually had a player that I originally had on my list that I ended up reevaluating, ended up taking off my list. Um, it was very difficult to figure out which of the players I had remaining. There were like a list of like 6 or 7 that I was debating for last 2 or 3 spots. I don't. At the end of the day, kind of just was like, okay, who would I least like to lose? Like it was more of, I'm looking at these players. I don't want to lose any of them. I love to keep them all. I love having depth in my system, which actually helped me a lot last year when my pitching had a bunch of injuries. I had a lot of pitching depth, and I still protected 14 pitchers, and there was still a list of like 4 or 5 pitchers. I'm like, I wish I could still protect them. But at the end of the day, it wasn't like, who do I not want to lose? It's who do I not want to lose the least, and just like see, okay, let's see what happens here. I For the people that I left unprotected, I'm pretty much certain one of them is going to be gone, and it's a toss up over who the rest of them are going to be. So it's going to be really interesting to see who is taken from my team and how, because I believe what's being taken from my team is going to dictate how I approach free agency.
Mm-hmm. JR, how about you?
So I'll be honest. You know, with the way my team is constructed at this point, talent wise, I mean, most of my better prospects came from very recent drafts. So I didn't really have to think about protecting, too many of my better prospects. The guys that I have in, double A, triple A, that are going to be eligible. I mean, quite frankly, there are a lot of, replaceable guys that fall together. I mean, putting together this protection list, if you would have told me we can only protect 20 guys, I would have been completely fine with that, because I just, again, I just don't have the talent that I'm all that worried about once I got past 15, even people that would be eligible. One of the guys that I'm not protecting is Javi Baez. He's a great, talented infielder who can play many positions. Please take him.
He's very good. He is good at the baseball.
He's good at the baseball and fielding.
I'm in the exact same boat as you, and we were talking about this pre-show. It's not that I don't have players who are worth protect. It's not that I don't have players who I'd like to keep. It's that not all the players are really worth protecting. It boils down to, I think, how much you value what you currently have. And I'm not going to sit there and say, wow, Reggie Lawson, you are an amazing player. I feel like I should keep you. Just generic relief pitcher. I don't care if I don't care if he's taken, because there are 100 of those guys in the eMLB. He's a good player, but there are a ton of them out there. So what it boiled down to is I did about 18 protection slots of guys who I knew I absolutely did not want to go, and I was a struggle to find 7 more guys who I just would put on the list, because most of them I didn't care if they would be there next year or not.
Yeah.
I think for me, a lot of how I run my team is actually influenced with my fandom with my real life St. Louis Cardinals, because the past couple seasons the Cardinals have been blasted for not finding depth at positions when injuries happen, and I'm doing my best in this league to make sure I have that depth so that when injuries do happen, I'm ready for it. And so I think that's where it comes into play. Is I don't want to lose. It's not like I'm losing top prospects or guys that are going to definitely be in my starting lineup or starting rotation. It's guys I value because they are valuable backups that can fill the role that I need them to play if they need to step up due to injury. And a lot of them did that for me last season. And I don't want to lose. I don't want to lose that secure. It's like a security blanket for me, or a security net, safety net. I just don't want to lose those, but I'm gonna have to lose some of them.
I think what's interesting, is it's going to be interesting to see what the approach is from the two expansion teams.
Yes.
I know we're not going to dive into free agency, but we've talked about how there's not a whole lot of free agent talent out there for people to go after and sign. So does that change their mindset that, okay, going into this expansion draft, I'm not really worried about leaving myself a whole bunch of room for free agency, and I might be willing, to take on, a couple of these contracts that maybe they're kind of bad for another year or two, but I can get out from under them, after a short period of time and potentially have money for some other free agent class. Especially
It'll be.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's going to be super interesting to see what happens with this expansion draft. And we'll come back after the expansion draft and evaluate what happened and give you a full breakdown on the expansion draft. Sort of trying to give you a little preview of what to expect. Just to break down the rules real quick, each team in MLB, so all 30 teams will have 5 players selected from their organization. It'll create 75 players for each team that will be assigned to their major and minor leagues to help them fill out their squad of the Portland Stags and the Montreal Expos. Then from there, it's full free agency.
Then shalt thou draft 5 players from each team, no more, no less.
No more, no less. In the immortal words of Anju Alexander.
I was very proud of myself for that, by the way.
That was very good.
But I'm actually gonna make one point that before we wrap up here, when it comes to players being left unprotected. JR, you mentioned that you're leaving a Javi Baez unprotected because mostly the contract. He's not a bad player, but he's not necessarily worth the money that it's debatable. But players like we mentioned earlier, the Dodgers are potentially leaving players like Cody Bellinger, who's making $30 million of unprotected. Think all these teams are like leaving these players unprotected, hoping that the expansion teams will take them, but they can only take on so much money. So all of these teams aren't going to be able to unload these contracts. It'll be interesting to see which teams can get some financial freedom and which teams are still going to be stuck with these contracts that they left unprotected.
Do you guys remember what the number is? I know it's $25 million in team cash and $200 million team budget.
Something like that.
Yeah, something around there.
Close.
Which should give them an effective budget of $225.
Yeah, essentially. All right, gentlemen, we're going to end this episode the same way we end every Here's Why You're Wrong episode. It's time for the hot seat.
Oh, man, I got to think of questions now.
That's the whole fun of the hot seat. You just got to anticipate it's coming every time.
You're on the hot seat first, and I'm going to start you here, all right?
All right.
We talked about it before the show of 6 of the top free agents.
Yes.
We're not going to talk about the CCP one because I want to save that first for when we can dive a little more into it.
Fair enough.
Trey Turner is the biggest position player on the market.
Yeah.
Where does he sign and for how many years?
I think a team that might have a place to fill in for Trey Turner would be a team like Philadelphia. Which is funny because Trey Turner just signed there in real life. I think Philadelphia in eMLB also makes a lot of sense. They do have I don't know if you would call it a hole at shortstop. I don't know if defensively Philadelphia would like to fill shortstop with Trey Turner. Maybe they figure out a way to slide Trey Turner in elsewhere. Like I think Pirate used him a lot as a designated hitter in Washington, which would make a lot of sense. But you also have Bryce Harper, who's kind of their designated hitter. But I think that Philadelphia, with the budget that they have, may be willing to splurge on 4 or 5 years of Trey Turner.
Cool. Brenden, you're next.
So, knowing that St. Louis is going to lose some players that they view as key depth, will St. Louis be aggressive either in the trade market or in free agency trying to refill those depth spots if they lose them?
Absolutely. I'm always looking to make moves.
Moves incoming?
Moves have been discussed. Okay. I don't know if I can say definitively if any. There's nothing that's been agreed to after the self-imposed trade deadline. There are ongoing discussions, but that's it.
And JR, question for Andrew.
Was there any player that you thought was going to be traded during this window here that ultimately did not get moved?
I'd have to kind of quickly look back at the trade block. I'll go ahead and say Kyle Tucker from the Astros. I feel like he might have been. He's a good offensive talent and a little bit cheaper. I feel like he might have been easier to move than Kirilloff was. So I was actually surprised that Kirilloff got moved before Tucker.
Fair enough. Brenden, it's your turn on the seat. All right, my question for you. If you could trade places with any of the 30 or any of the 29 GMs, not one of the two expansion teams,
okay.
Who would it be and why?
The Dodgers, because that lineup is scary. They have the tools to work with, man.
I gotta think of a question. How many first basemen are you actually going to have on your opening day roster?
Well, the Infinity Gauntlet has room for 6 stones, so that should answer that question.
Well played. JR.
And yes, Michael Bush is the Soul Stone, because he's a good old boy.
We talked before with the Barboza deal about some of the best 1-2 pitching combinations around eMLB. Who do you see as the best 1-2 hitting combination in eMLB?
That's a really tough one, actually. It used to. I would have said Devers and Diaz prior to the Devers trade.
That's fair.
But honestly, Serrano and Devers now. And I know that Ohtani and Trout comes to mind early for home runs, but in terms of value stats, Serrano and Devers is going to be scary next to each other.
I'll go ahead and give my answer to that. I'd say Rowan and Alvarez in Houston.
Yeah, you're asking me to work fast here.
I'd also like to throw out one of GM sitting here. I'd like to say either Bluth and Spence or Ronald Acuna and Royce Lewis.
I mean, Lewis is not a top 2 hitting combo. They are 2 great players, and it's a great combo overall, but neither one of them is Devers, Serrano, Trout, Alvarez at the plate.
See, Aiden, I thought you were going to go Edgar Barrios and Trey Griffin.
I thought that's where you. I didn't think you were going to name mine, but I'll actually say, bold prediction for the Cardinals: at the end of the 2027 season, you're going to be replacing one of those 2 players with a third name.
You could even say, and you could even say in Tampa, Mayhall and Pearson.
Mayhall is good, but I don't think he's like top tier. He's definitely above average and leaning towards top tier.
See,
but
I don't feel the need to, plug my team all the time. I don't
As you wear your sweatshirt.
Yeah.
And I don't feel the need to be
my team.
I don't feel the need to be a all the time, but we're still here.
Well, the jerk store called.
It's all out of you.
JR, question for you. Will Cincinnati finish bottom in the NL East?
No, Cincinnati will finish in the exact opposite of the bottom in the NL East.
Ooh.
Wow.
What is the one move this offseason that you can make that'll make that statement a reality?
Well, I mean, I obviously could acquire a top-notch starting pitcher. That could bring that to reality.
Okay. Those are tough to go around, though, unless you're Cleveland.
So, the new 8-team NL East will bring back a concept from the old days of baseball, where you have a first division and a second division. Top 4 is bottom 4. Which 4 teams will be the top division or the first division in the new NL East?
I would say, well, obviously I have to say Reds if I'm going to say I'm going to win the division. So that's one. I'm a believer in the Phillies now. I kind of have to be a believer in the Phillies now, so I'd put the Phillies in there. Washington, still has a ton of talent coming back there. I have a hard time, doubting them there. And then I think the Braves. I think the Braves are going to take a big step back up this year.
So for those of you taking notes in your NL East rivals, that means the Pirates, the Mets, the Marlins, and the Expos are all at the bottom of that list.
Well,
now, to be fair, the Expos don't have a team yet, so.
Well, you have a team. You have a team openly in a 20-year rebuilding project, an expansion team. The Mets and Cody.
Yeah, would anybody disagree with at least three of those as definites?
All right, I get to take the seat.
I love you guys. I mean, I love you. I love you all, my NL East brethren.
Nice welcoming party you're giving them as you come in like, oh yeah, I'm here. I'm taking the division now.
Well, we sure know Cody isn't. So.
Oh.
I don't know.
See,
I don't know. I think
I'm not saying
a
that.
better record than St. Louis.
No, that ain't happening. Even with the weaker division, I'm still gonna finish with a better record than the Pirates.
Dude, you're playing in the NL West.
Yeah, I know.
All right.
I'm fully aware of where I'm playing.
JR, question time.
Question time. So the Tampa Bay Rays. If you had to set a lineup right now, what's your starting nine for the Rays next season?
Not setting a specific batting order, but just position wise now.
Right.
Behind the dish, Aiden Pearson. Across the diamond, third to first. We're gonna see as of right now, Wander Franco, Gelfrey Marte, Fritz Flaherty, and Drew Mendoza. And then across the outfield, left to right, we'll see Ashlis Dudley. We'll see Alex Murray and Jared Kelenic with Jim Mayhall as the DH.
Solid lineup.
Yep.
I'm gonna kind of flip the question that you asked with like the division thing. AL West, top division, bottom division, top four, bottom four.
AL West.
I actually feel like that one's probably not going to be very hard.
Yeah, it's not. I'm just trying to think of how to say this now. I'm gonna say obviously LA, Houston, Seattle, and
see, this is the hard one. It's the 4 or 5 that's hard.
LA, Houston, Seattle.
The two AL Central teams coming in are openly rebuilding, plus Oakland and Portland.
I'll say Texas. Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense.
I wouldn't be surprised if Minnesota could hit the four spot, but
not after the moves they've made. I just can't see
Texas underperformed last year, and Minnesota's made moves to make themselves worse.
So we've talked a lot about 1-2 pitching duos. We kind of came to a consensus that 1 and 2 are San Francisco and Cleveland. Of all of the available possibilities, who do you think is going to field that third 1-2 punch this year?
Tampa Bay.
Okay.
Jim Giesler and Ben Spears. Denny Martinez is a third. Efren Contreras. Espinoza. You could even Jansen Guerrero had a great season. I think I have a solid rotation 1 through 5, but Giesler and Spears up at the top. I have zero worries.
And you still went out and got Denny Martinez anyway.
Oh, that's not a bad idea. Load up.
Enough?
Three of the top 4 in Cy Young voting in the same rotation. I don't think anyone's ever complained about that.
No, not at all.
It's a good squad. I think all of us have good squads going into this year. Well, gentlemen, expansion draft is coming up very soon. We'll be back to break down the expansion draft. I don't know in what regard, in what capacity, whether it'll be another crossover, whether it'll be another who knows what. But This has been a fun episode. I saw Brenden do that and it threw me off my game for a second. I was like,
That's what I do here.
I don't know what JR's doing.
JR is just being JR. Well,
right.
We'd like to say thank you to everyone for watching. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe to the video. Join the Discord where you're getting all the information. Follow us on Twitch as well. Make sure to check us all out on Twitter. You can also follow the new eMLB Twitter accounts that are popping up for the eMLB teams. That's a fun little addition that has been made to the
search
eMLB
hashtag
universe.
eMLB.
Yes.
Hashtag eMLB on Twitter. Make sure to use it, abuse it, and have fun with it as well.
Smash those follow buttons.
Smash them. Smash them. Absolutely destroy them. Also,
Right, too many adjectives.
No, I don't think there's no such thing as too many adjectives. We'd also like to say a big thank you to
I'm not a grammar expert.
Yeah, true. We'd also like to say a big thank you to Kamish for all the hard work he's putting in leading up to this expansion draft. We really appreciate everything you do, not only for the league, but for all of us as well. Also, we are available to be booked for bar mitzvahs, weddings, quinceañeras, as well as our quartet. So please make sure to reach out to us if you would like to be contacted. Album will be coming out soon. But for all of us here at the eMLB Sportsnet, as well as on the Insiders, and Here's Why You're Wrong, we appreciate you guys watching. Take care and have a great night.
I don't know. I've never been on. Well, no.
I don't know.
Actually,
Here, I'll do
I
that
have
as
been
an
on.
unofficial start.
You just reverse it. Sunrise, sunset.
Sunrise.